好，欢迎大家再来到水星兔的频道。那今天要把之前这个2月份的这一支影片继续把它给剪完这个第2集我有整理出了几个比较大的重点就大家还是要去制定出自己的一套这个系统，然后把交易当这个一门生意来看待。然后比较有趣的是 Vince 他也有分享早期他爆仓喷掉35万美金的这个经验，里面也有讲到，然后也帮助大家去这个改变一下自己的想法，因为像最早 Apex 其实是要打1个月才能出金，那 Vince 也提到这个其实是有帮助到他去把这个目标设定的小一点，那最后也成功的有达到。然后最后就是聊一下一些这个风控的问题，小停损跟宽停损还是有蛮多的讨论，所以我也问了一下他的看法，那大概就是这样，那剩下就大家自己看影片咯。
And a lot of people question a 50 tick stop, especially on NQ. And I don't trade other instruments, so I don't really know what my stops would be on the various other instruments out there. But I do know this. I found it interesting. Trader Kane who Apex recently paid $2 million out to.
I saw his videos.
Yeah, he actually runs a 30 tick. In one of his videos, he talked about a 30 tick stop on NQ. And I was like, I was very impressed to hear that, because I'm going, I have similar thinking, and it works. Because the one thing you have to remember is prop firms don't penalize you for entering trades. So if you enter 100 trades on the day and get stopped out for even, that's okay. That's okay. I would rather get stopped out 100 times than allow a 50 tick stop to get hit one time. So anytime the market starts to move against me, even if it's 25 or 30 ticks, many times I'll just close. I found that from an emotional perspective, I don't like stop. I know when my stop gets hit, it bothers me.
Yeah.
And also, a lot of times I will be tempted to revenge enter, immediately enter another trade. And generally it's in the same direction, which is absurd, right? And so I just don't let myself do that. So I tend to just close trades, reanalyze.
Okay. How often, if your stop was being hit, what's kind of the range for you to re-enter the trades? After how many minutes or how many hours would you kind of re-enter?
It took me 9 minutes to make an espresso. So after every trade, win or lose, I went and made myself an espresso.
Okay.
And I would drink the espresso, go back to the screens, and usually the chart was showing something different, right?
So just go to do other things.
Do something, remove yourself from it, especially if you have a winner. Walk away.
Okay.
If you have a winner, walk away. Because a lot of times you'll walk away and you'll start putting it in perspective. You'll walk away and you'll go, wow, I just made enough money to buy an iPhone. You start to kind of rationalize things the way that you should. This is a lot of money. And if you have a loss, journal it. Why did you have that loss? What made you enter? And if you entered based on your strategy and you did not bend the rules to your strategy and you lost, brush it off. Don't worry about it. That's the other thing, is people they'll develop a strategy that works, that really does have a great success rate, and then they lose. So what they immediately do is start to adjust that strategy. Understand, if you entered off your strategy and if your strategy has a high success rate and it loses once in a while, just brush it off. It's no big deal. Move, walk away. Who cares?
Just another day.
It's just the market.
Yeah. Okay.
Market didn't work. Maybe you front run your entry a little bit. Maybe you should have waited a little bit. There's always that. But if you entered according to your strategy, I'm a big believer in writing those rules of engagement and sticking to them.
I was also wondering, how did you, because a lot of people don't have this habit. Does your past experience help you a little bit on building all these standard process in terms of trading?
Yes.
Because I think you treat
Yes.
trading like a
Yep.
proper business, right?
Yep.
You have a very clear business plan. But a lot of people they probably just go to the company and work, do all the administrative stuff. Maybe don't really have that boss mindset, right? So I was just curious on your journey to.
Yeah. So my entire career has been import export, designing things, and so everything I've ever done was we had to design a product, we had to make tooling for the product, we had to design the packaging for the product, then we had to look at the retailer, we had to look at their timeline, we had to look at the shipping timeline. Everything had this sequence of events and dates that we had to follow. And then we kind of had this SOP we had to follow through the whole manufacturing process. And so I've always looked at stuff and said, there's got to be a reason and a plan. There has to be a clear, articulated business plan for everything we do. And when I finally took that same approach, because I didn't do it initially. Initially, I was a gambler like everybody. I was no different. But when I finally took the approach that trading is no different than any business, and I looked at it saying, okay, because by the time that I had actually started to learn trading, I had lost about $350,000 just in trading.
Wow.
Just in trading. That wasn't the loss I had in Shanghai from other businesses, which wasn't trading related. Yeah. But by the time I actually started to be profitable, I had lost about $350,000. I'm looking at this going, if someone came to me in business and said, I will give you $1 million paycheck if you invest $350,000, you'll do that every day of the week. If I hand you $350 and you're going to get $1 million back in 6 months, you're going to do it. That opportunity was there. Yep. It's just that I had not clearly articulated the plan on how I was going to get there. And without a plan, you're going nowhere. If you do not have that, if you don't have that goal, if you don't have that finish line, you're never going to get there.
Did you remember how crazy you were in the very beginning? Like the live brokerage account, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 contracts with NQ or something like that? So I remember the first time I ever did a live brokerage account, I put $5,000 in a live brokerage account. And then I went in and carefully calculated how many contracts I could trade with the margin requirements. And I went max contracts and blew it the first trade. I'm being serious. The $5,000 was gone instantly. I immediately wired him another $5,000 and blew that $5,000, I think the next day or when after the money hit. But it was within 2 days I blew 2 live brokerage accounts. And then I took that same mentality to prop. Yep. So I would buy a $300K eval, 35 contracts at Apex, and that's just how I traded them. I traded 35 contracts every time, all the time. Wow.
And then when I'd move to PA, I would generally dial it back, but I would enter 1, 2, or 3, 4, 5 contracts, have some small success. As soon as I had a loss, what did I do? Max contracts. Max contracts. And it just never works. And I think that the contract sizes that Apex has on their accounts need to be dialed back a bit. I think they set this mental, it gives you kind of this mental mindset that's probably not the healthiest for us in the long term. Because in reality, even though it's a $300K account, and in reality, even though you can trade 35 contracts, doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
But again, everything we ask for isn't the best for us. Take, for instance, back when I was doing my $1 million run, Apex only paid every 30 days. So it was 30-day payouts. That was the best thing for me. Because what you did, if you wanted to get a payout, your path to that payout was 30 days. Now your path to payout is 8 days. So what do? We anticipate in 8 days we're going to get a payout. And we push as much as we possibly can in that 8 days. It's not, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to start looking at where do you want to be, and then run that out and make it down to some manageable amount. If you want to make $1 million, go back and do the math. Yeah. It's $416 a day if you're trading 20 accounts. Now, 20 accounts isn't always realistic, but just dial that back. You can keep dialing that back. If you're trading 5 accounts and you want to make $250,000, start running that out for 6 months and just see where you're at. It's really unbelievable how attainable it is.
Yeah, I think when you divide it, it's just really surprising that how easy that looked like, right?
Yeah.
And I was also wondering, like, I also saw some other like platform owners, they have some data inside. They were telling like wider stops with like smaller contract. I'm just curious on what's your thought on that one, because some people probably enter like a micro NQ with probably like 3 or 5 contracts, but they use a wider stop like 30 or 50 points. Like, do you think that's a good way?
I think it depends on your strategy. So I think stop size should depend a lot on your strategy. So if your strategy is defined, like in my case, my strategies are all defined off a lot of higher time frame confluence that I feel like is quite relevant. And so if I enter off of a lot of higher time frame confluence, I'll actually run a tighter stop because I'm quite confident in that. Now, some people say, well, if you're quite confident, why do you run a bigger stop? It's just, I'm not going to do that. But I enter with 50 ticks on everything. So I don't think that you should ever be willing to risk Apex has a 30% loss rule.
Yep.
That's actually a really good rule from the standpoint that why would you ever, if you were going to go put $5,000 in a brokerage account, why would you risk 30% of that brokerage account on one trade? All we're saying is give yourself a chance. Give yourself a chance to come back, make another trade, hopefully get it back, continue trading. So it depends on your strategy. Some strategies out there, if you're entering with a micro contract and you're entering in a zone, yeah, then you can run a lot bigger stop, right? If you're running micros, stop size potentially could be, and there's probably nothing wrong with that, But the challenge is that traders aren't willing to trade micros. They're not willing to tighten stops up. They want to give themselves a lot of room and trade micros. A lot of a big stop in micro contracts on NQ spells disaster. You have to be very careful, right? Because if your stop gets hit a couple times, or forbid that you keep pulling that stop back, right? Because we get in the moment, we develop a bias as traders, and we're human, and we don't like to be wrong, right? And Dale Carnegie, who's very famous, for teaching a lot of how to work with other people, he always said, if you're wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. And he's talking that from a social perspective. I always said we need to teach that from a trading perspective. When you're wrong, admit it quickly. I always say be patient with winning trades. In other words, if your stop's in profit, let them, figure out where your take profit is. Understand what the market's doing. Be patient. Protect the downside, but be patient. If you're wrong, be enormously impatient. If the trade's going against you, be enormously impatient. And by that I mean, don't sit there and second guess it. If you're wrong, you're wrong. Just get out. Because your emotions, I found that it's much easier to recover from a trade that you simply close versus letting it hit your stop or letting it hit a stop that you kept moving down or keep moving back, Because it's within your strategy. At the end of the day, you followed your rules. And I think that's the important thing, is psychologically, at the end of the day, if you go, I followed all the rules, I never broke any rules. Wasn't that successful, but I didn't break any rules. That's a step in the right direction.